Get a group of Sabbath keepers in the room and ask them, what's God require? What are we supposed to be doing? If you got 2, you'll get at least 3 answers. You got 10, you might have 50 answers. I'm not going to answer that question with every possibility today, but what I do want to talk about is what I think is the biggest shortcoming, put it like that, with Sabbath keepers. If I were to ask each one in the room today, what makes you different than the other Christians in the world, just think about it in your head, what your answer would be. What would you say? Some might say, well, the law. Others would say, well, the Sabbath, of course. The things that God has revealed to us, understanding, doctrines. And those are differences that we have, but what's important? What's the most important out of all those? That's really the question. Some people would say, and I've thought about this before, say, well, I'm come from a line of people that keep the Sabbath in my family. I'm a 4th generation. Emily back there, she's 6th generation. And that almost sounds boastful, but it's, we're born into this. It wasn't like we studied and figured it out on our own, and nobody figures it out on your own. God has to show you. But it's a whole lot easier in some aspect to just know it from the time you're able to talk and see what you're doing. And now you still have to go out and prove it to yourself. Is this true? Is this false? Is, this something God wants? But you got to admit, you get a big jump start on the world when you're born into something like that you can, most people don't even know about the Sabbath. Or they're deceived and they think it's Sunday. You got to show them a calendar. Say, let me show you how to count. Sunday is 1. Monday is 2. If I were to ask people, why do you go to church where you go? Why do you think that place is the correct place for you to go versus somewhere else? Because for a lot of people, there's several choices to be made. There's a bunch of them out there. What do you think that they'd say? A lot of them would zero in on doctrine. So is that really the correct answer? Let me ask the question. Let's take a look at what God says about this. Micah chapter 6, verse 6. It says, with what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before the high God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, 10,000 rivers of oil? So here somebody's asking the question, Mike's asking the question, what should I do to come and worship God? What does he really want out of me? What does he want from me? Should I bring him and give him all of these offerings? Continuing on, it says, shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. And with what does the Lord require of you? Well, here's where I got this title from. What does the Lord require of you? So here's in the Bible, and he's asking this question, making this statement. What's the answer? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. That's the answer. Does that mean you can ignore the other things? No. But if you were going to list them in importance, what's the first thing I should be striving for? We're never going to have the perfect doctrine. We're never going to have it all figured out. What is our concentration on individually? What do you think about when you say, what's God want me to do? Don't worry about somebody else. This is for all of us. This message today is for me, because I got a lot to learn about it. For those that think that our doctrines define and identify us, look what it says in John 13:34. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. That's what identifies us as God's children. Not just that we keep the holy days. That if you are his child, you'll be doing the other things. It's a given. But those other things aren't what identifies you. Jesus said, he can ask, how do you know who my children really are? That's another way to phrase this question, this statement. Doctrines are important, but they're not the most important. They're not first on the list. Proverbs 28:9 says, one who turns away his ear from hearing the law, even his prayers are an abomination. So the false doctrines, the refusal to do what God says, he commands us, can disqualify us from being his child and from eternal life, from being saved. But that's not what gets us there first. Think about that for a minute. Love and doing the right thing, no matter what, is more important. Let's take a look at Matthew 23:23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected, what's it say? The weightier matters of the law. You mean there's something more important than tithes? If you don't do it, even if you tithe and you don't do the weightier matters of the law, you're a hypocrite? Jesus himself said this. What are they? Justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. Blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. You know, when I've read this before, I'm thinking, yeah, stick it to them, give it to them. The religious leaders, they're the hypocrites. And what made them hypocrites? They went to great extremes on keeping some of God's laws, and it wasn't even on their radar. It wasn't a desire. It wasn't something that they did that are doling out justice, mercy, and faith. I hate self-righteous people. I really do. Maybe you say, oh, you shouldn't hate anybody. I hate the things that they do when they are self-righteous. It was one of the excuses that I used to leave the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Because there was some self-righteous hypocrites there that said things and did things. And it was like, I latched onto it. That justified everything. All of this, I was barely 20 years old. It was a long journey that began when I was a little kid. My grandparents, I've talked about this, so I'm not going to go into detail, but when I'd be at their house, which I spend summers and every holiday over there, I'd hear them in their bedroom next door to their guest bedroom was theirs, and they're on their knees praying. I hear them praying about me. Wore out, I say they wore out they had hardwood floors, they wore out on the side of the bed. You know, you could tell right where they were kneeling every night before they'd go to bed. Since I was little. They understood one thing. On the way over here, we were talking about my mother. I love her. She was very intelligent, but she was a dingbat. And I say that, I love her, but she got a full ride, 4-year scholarship at a university. Free tuition and all expenses. One of the things, she got mad one time and she's telling Mary, she's complaining about that woman that's in her phone. She tells her, she says, you listen now. She'll start talking. She talks to me. I don't want that woman in my phone. She had an iPhone. Siri, Kathy's smiling because she would complain about things like that. I say, Mom, there's no woman in your phone. But I loved her a lot, and I miss her. And my grandma, who was an Italian, she was a school teacher, one of the things she did before she got married, but she was a dingbat too. So my mother was her mother's daughter. But they understood something. Proverbs 22:6, my grandma and my grandpa. Train up a child in the way he should go, and it... Oh, okay, sorry about that. Well, I guess I don't have that in there, Mary, so I missed it. Train up a child, this is Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So this is a hope that a lot of parents have. They know if they've done their job, they can train their kids. And I guess this is what my grandparents were hanging on to hope. They died before they saw any of it, but they knew. They had given me the experiences. They had made sure I knew some things. It was one of the things that they wanted to happen and to see. You know, I talked about hypocrites in the church. One lesson, a major lesson I learned was from a big fat preacher. His name was Roger Radcliffe. I became very close friends with that man, and I would tell her, I know he's a preacher, but he's like a regular person. He showed the things that God said are important to him. Justice and mercy and faith. Remember the first time, you're going to ask Mary about this, we went to church, they're going to have a new preacher, so everybody shows up, it's packed. And he comes out after songs and that, he comes walking out up to the pulpit, and she looks at me, and I'm just going down, I'm trying to stay hid. Oh no, not him. At the Seventh-day Adventist camp meetings every summer, we still go up there, but one of the things that they would do, it was summer camp for the kids when I did this. He had his boat up there, and he had a really nice boat. But anyhow, he's the one that taught me how to water ski. And I threw a rock through his windshield because I was a little terror. You know, I was one of those little apostate kids that you wanted to grab a hold by the neck and squeeze until their eyes popped out. He knew I did it, he just couldn't prove it. So I'm trying to stay hidden. I'm thinking, boy, we ain't coming back until they get rid of this one. And everybody, of course, he goes and stands in the back, and everybody, stands up one row at a time, and they're walking out the back door to leave the church and that. And there's all these people gathered around them, and I made this big swing, like, I'm trying to stay hidden and scrunch down a little bit, and I'm going to avoid this guy. And I felt somebody grab me by the back of my collar and stop me. He says, "I know you." And he sticks his hand out, and I couldn't get out of there that day fast enough. But we became friends, close friends. And he taught me a lot of things. He never brought up the thing with the boat. Maybe I was a challenge to him or something. But I spent a lot of time at his house and was very close to him. A preacher showed mercy and love, faith, justice, forgiveness. That's not like most of them that I had ever met. But how about us? How do we train our children? Do we teach them that they're better than others, that they're special because they know about the Sabbath? Do we teach them to be judgmental of others? I've seen kids, I've seen adults, they just learned it from the adults, making statements that were really hurtful and harmful to other people. Say, "You spoiled little brat." I wanted to grab them by the neck and squeeze till their eyes popped out. But it wasn't the kids' fault. I know exactly where they learned that kind of stuff from. Do we teach kids to be bigoted towards others? Religious bigotry is probably one of the worst, because we all can feel justified by it if we do it. Well, look, right here in the Bible, it says so. Those stupid pagans, or whatever it is. Well, they're only stupid because God hasn't shown them. Most of the people are not in just open rebellion. Now, there's some of them out there, but that's not the case for most of the people. Let's take a look. John chapter 4, verse 7. It says, "A woman of Samaria came to draw water." Let me pull the verse up. "A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.' For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. And the woman of Samaria said to him, 'How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans.'" I'm not going to go into all of the history and the detail, but they didn't get along. It's sort of like one, well, maybe that's not the best, but I'll use it anyhow. One Sabbath group on this side of church and another Sabbath group on the other side of church, and they don't get along for whatever reason. Who brought this up? The disciples. They come back and they see Jesus talking to a woman that's a Samaritan. Obviously, they knew who she was. And they ask him, "You're a Jew. What are you doing talking to this stupid pagan woman over here?" They're apostate. So were they justified in having the attitude like that? Was it the right thing to do, to say, to question? I got thinking this morning, my father-in-law was a righteous man. We were only married a couple years when he died. He got sick before he was 65. He died from cancer. He struggled till he hit 65 so that he could retire, and he never got to really retire. Shortly after he was 65, he went in the hospital, never come home. I thought he was weak. He would have been justified to be bitter and angry. I think he was 62 years old. He had decades of work into a company. with a pension to retire off of. When they went out of business, everybody found out that worked there that the owners of the corporation had raided the retirement fund, stole it to try and keep things going and to pay themselves. And by the time they shut down, there was nothing to collect. He was able to collect zero. Imagine being 62 years old and having to start out all over again for minimum wage. That could make somebody bitter. He was robbed and he was cheated. I never heard him. The only reason I know that is because Mary told me what happened. He never went around saying, oh, but I was cheated, I was wronged, and this is so, these evil people. The only reason I know that story, her mom never went into detail, but a couple times she'd talk about, she really hated big companies and big business and because of what they had done to her husband and her. But Mary's the one that explained it to me. Another one, and you don't know these people, I understand that. I just use it as examples because, boy, if that could make somebody miserable the rest of their life, that's a good excuse to be miserable. Saw my grandfather. I thought he was stupid. One time, a woman backs into his car and busts the grill of his car. And he's talking about, I knew that, I asked him, Grandpa, what happened to your car? And then next time I was there, it was all fixed. And I said, well, what did you do? Did the bill somehow come up? And he said, no. He said, it was a young woman with a couple kids, and they didn't have any money, and she didn't have any insurance. And so I just went out and got the car fixed. I said, well, did you call the cops? Because that's what, call the cops. No, he felt sorry for her. He said it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't know what it costs. I just bought a grill for my van. I got it for $40, I think. Sitting in the back of the van. I got to put it in yet. But it's not huge. He took mercy, pity. Didn't want to cause her any problems. I thought he was stupid for doing something like that. Now, I'm not saying that if somebody hits you and wrecks your car, you can't call the cops, get a police report, turn in your insurance company, whatever you're going to do. But sometimes we don't realize. I've had people hit us. I remember the time when Bible study, somebody hit Mary, a hit and run, and she chased them all through neighborhoods and down the interstate, and she's on the phone. She calls me in, and I said, call cops. She's on the phone with the cops saying, okay, they just turned here. Now they're on I-640. And finally the dispatcher says, where are you? She tells him. He says, pull off at the next exit. It was like, these crooks hit my car and took off, and don't know. Did they take off? We think, because they were illegal, didn't speak hardly any English, and probably didn't have insurance and driver's license. But we don't know for sure. Did they maybe run because they got no money? Don't know. Don't have a clue. I had somebody steal something from me. I thought I was this big-time business person. Was worth millions of dollars. Boy, I was bitter for a long time about it. Again, that's just wrong. Still call them the Martin Marietta Mafia. Nothing. Gone, 100%. Broke. Going down to food banks, begging for food. That wasn't right. Made me bitter for a really long time. Is that what is justified and right? Jesus' own disciples were judgmental. Let's go back and look at this. John chapter 4, verse 27. And at this point his disciples came and they marveled that he talked with a woman, yet no one said, what do you seek? Or why are you talking with her? They just couldn't figure out why he'd be talking to this Samaritan woman. Is he out of his mind? What's going on here? They didn't ask him why. They just, to themselves, they're thinking about it. So were they right? Were they justified? Was it the right thing to do? Was Jesus making a mistake? Was he out of his... Maybe he was having a bad day? He wasn't thinking clearly that day? Let's take a look at what happens here. John chapter 4, verse 39. I'm going to pick it up there. He didn't condemn this Samaritan woman, but let's look what happens. John 4:39, and many of the Samaritans of that city believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified, he told me all that I ever did. So when the Samaritans had come to him, they urged him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days. And many more believed because of his own word. He's talking to this woman. She went back and told everybody about him. They got to hear it for themselves. And he stays there with these dirty, rotten, stinking Samaritans. How can he? Doesn't he know that we don't talk to those people? And many of them believed. No, I don't think he was making a mistake. So why is this in the Bible? Why is this included? Is this possibly an example for us? Let me show you a story that matches a lot of things that happen in the world today. I want to tell you a story about a father that has 2 messed up kids, 2 messed up sons. Most people think that there's one messed up, but there's really 2 of them. Both of them are really screwed up. Luke chapter 15, verse 11. And then he said to them, a certain man had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. And not many days later, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possession with prodigal living. I remember there's 7 kids in my family. One of my sisters, and my dad was telling me about it. He was furious. One of my sisters came to him and said, can I have my inheritance now? I won't need it later. I'm struggling now. I can't wait until you're dead. Just give it to me now. And he was so mad. He told her, he says, no. He says, well, I might need that. Me and your mother might need that when we get old and I'm not working anymore. My dad wasn't a rich guy. And from that time on, he was kind of suspicious. There was one point I had to tell him, I didn't tell him nicely, it was my father, I shouldn't have talked. Anyhow, I told him, I says, look, take your money and take your inheritance and put it where the sun don't shine. But that's not how I told him. I said, I don't care about your money. If I'm talking to you, if I have anything to do with you, I want you to know it's not because I'm going to get something from you someday. It's because you're my father and I want to have a relationship with you. And part of me telling him all of that is because I know what my sister had done to him. So at that point, and he wasn't a rich guy. He had some money, but he wasn't rich by any stretch of imagination. I said that there's 2 apostate kids here. See, the younger one in essence says, I don't care anything about you. Just give me what I got coming to me. He thought that somehow that he had a right to it, his possession. Let's pick it up and keep reading. Luke 15:14, it says, but when he had spent all, there arose a severe famine in the land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to the citizens of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine, the pigs. I remember Mike Alt told me about some boots that he had, because he had worked on a hog farm, and he took them Sandy's dad. And Sandy's dad was going to put new soles and stuff on them. She's chuckling. You know the story? Yeah. Years later, Mike liked these boots. Years later, Hank told him, he says, I don't want to touch these things. He says, they stink from walking around in the pig poop. It had gotten into the leather. And especially when he started opening them up and taking the stitches out, and he's going to put the sole, he says, I can't stand it. So my uncle had a pig, well, he had dairy farm and pigs. He had, I don't even know, 200-300 pigs, 2 big barns. And so it stunk in there. But I didn't walk around in the pig poop like Mike had to do to get it all over his boots. But this is what this kid is reduced to. Feeding the pigs. And he figures out that they had it better off than he did. So let's continue on. Verse 16 says, and he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything to eat. So here the pigs were eating better than he is. He had all kinds of money and he squanders it all. Verse 17. But when he came to himself, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and yet I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So finally he comes to his senses and he's going to repent. And he realizes he's sinned against heaven and his father. He violated the 5th commandment by not honoring his mother and his father. But he's going to say, let me be a hired hand. Because even your hired hand have it so much better than me with these pigs. So how does his father react to his son going to him and telling him this? Verse 20, it says, and he arose and came to his father, but when he was still a long way off, his father saw him and had compassion, and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet, and bring the fatted calf here and kill it, and let us eat and be merry. For this my son was dead, and he is alive again. He was lost and is found. And they began to make merry. So this is like for an example for all of us. If we go apostate, if we've done things that are wrong, and we all do things that are wrong, but sometimes we do things that are really bad. We walk away from God. And when that happens, Satan's there whispering in your ear, oh, you can't go back. Everybody knows what you've been doing. You did this and you did that. And the longer you stay away, the easier it is to stay gone. But just like his father welcomes him back with open arms, that's what our Father does to us. Doesn't go into details. And so we can't read something into facts that's not evidence for that it actually says in the Bible. It doesn't tell us how many days that the son was gone, but I guarantee you that every day his father thought about it. Every day he wondered where his son was. Anybody that's ever been in something even remote like this knows what it's like. worried about your kids, praying for them, looking for them, wondering, things make you remember, bring back thoughts. You know that he saw him coming from a long way off. Was it his custom? Doesn't tell us, but was it his custom? Kind of look and say, boy, I wish my son had come walking down that road. He saw him long before he got there. It tells us about love, forgiveness, and mercy, though. It's an example. He didn't say, well, did you learn your lesson? Did you come to your senses now? You're ready to go apologize to your mother for causing her all this heartache? So many things that normal people would say. But I said that there was two messed up kids. Let's take a look at the other one, the brother. The one that people think, oh yeah, that was the good one. He stayed and took care of his parents. And the self-righteous one. That's why he's so messed up. The judgmental one. Luke chapter 15, verse 25. It says, now his older son was in the field, and he came and drew near to the house, and he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what these things meant. And he said to them, your brother has come, and because he has received him safe and sound, your father has killed the fatted calf. But he was angry and would not go in. Wouldn't even go in to see his brother. Because he had been there every day doing his job, taking care of his parents, while his brother's out just living it up and doing who knows what. Just left him with all of the responsibility, left him to deal with the mess. It says, therefore, his father came out and pled with him. So he answered and said to his father, lo, these many years I have been serving you. So it's been years. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I may make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours, not my brother, this son of yours, I knew every time my mother would say something to my dad when he'd come home from work, do you know what your son did today? Wasn't like it's her son too. When I was in trouble, it was your son. She's talking to my dad. This son of yours came and has devoured your livelihood with harlots. You have killed the fatted calf for him. And he said to him, son, you were always with me, and all that I have is yours. It was right that we should make merry and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive again, and was lost and is found. Let me remind you of another son. Another father. This guy's name is Jacob. He had 10 sons that were messed up. Oh, they all had their individual problems, but 10 that were really messed up. In fact, 10 of his sons hated their brother so much that they conspired against him and sold him off into slavery. Let their father suffer for 22 years thinking his son is dead. King concocted a story, showed him the bloody clothes, said he must have been torn by wild beasts. In spite of all this, in Revelation 21:12, it tells us when God moves his throne from heaven to earth, he has the names of all Jacob's sons, 12 sons, on each of the gates to enter into his city. Mercy, forgiveness, justice. I really don't know anybody that's conspired against one of their siblings to want to actually kill him, and then one finally says, instead of, let's just sell him, we'll make some money off of it. One of God's greatest attributes is that he's loving and merciful. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 16, it says, "Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need." You know, there are over 2,000 verses in the Bible that talk about justice. Get your Strong's out, look it up. It's a huge subject, and God wants us to understand and practice this ourselves. Everybody knows the story of Solomon and the two women that disputed over the child. We all know that he was the wisest man that lived, but what does the Bible tell us about that story? 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 28. Let's take a look at that. "And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had rendered, and they feared the king, for they saw the wisdom of God was in him to administer justice." Did he have the woman that claimed that the baby was hers, did he have her head chopped off? He just brought out things that would show who the true mother was, the kind of wisdom. Did he already know? Did he just say, "This is my judgment"? He's the king. Did he say, "This is my judgment. Off to the dungeon with this one, she's the imposter, and give the baby to this one, she's the true mother"? He could have. He would have been justified. It would have been okay to do it like that. Let's look at a lesson that Jesus teaches us in Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him." Let me pull a verse up here. "All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, 'Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me my food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in.'" Now, what's he separating these people over? You understood the fourth commandment, and you kept it. You didn't eat pork and shellfish. That's not what he's using, the standard that he's using. See, the other things are important, but that's not what is the most important. That's what I'm trying to bring out today. I'll bring up a verse that talks about that later. But when you go through the Bible and you look, apostasy gets you disqualified, but it being doctrinally correct is not what qualifies you. There's something else that will disqualify you, even if you kept. It's impossible to keep the law, because this is a huge part of the law. And if we ignore this part of it, you break one of them, you're guilty of all. I call it playing church. We're playing church. It's a whole package. I was a stranger and you took me in. Let's continue on, verse 36. "I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and gave you drink?'" It's like, we never saw it. What are you talking about? Verse 38, "When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king will answer and say to them, "Assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me." We all know the parable, the story about who's your brother. But how many actually live that out as part of our lives? Verse 41, then he will say to those on the left hand, depart from me, you cursed, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Okay, so what's on the left here? It's not good for these people that he says, depart from me. 42, for I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not take me in. Naked and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison and you did not visit me. Then he will answer, verse 44, then they will also say to him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer to them, saying, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And those will go away into everlasting punishment, and the righteous into eternal life. What was it that the righteous did versus the ones that were not so righteous that he's prepared the lake of fire for? So what am I saying today about justice and mercy? See, God never compromises. But he always has justice and mercy and love. We should be the same. Don't refuse to do the things that he says. Don't refuse to learn more and to be more godly and righteous. But don't forget the justice, mercy, and love part either. Always do what's right. Never compromise, but never sin either. Have mercy, love, and compassion for everyone. By this is what identifies us as his real disciples to the world. John 13:34, it says, a new commandment I give to you, that you shall have love for one another as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Again, it doesn't say because you kept the Sabbath, because you didn't eat pork, because you kept the holy days, and those are all a given. But that's not what does it. But sometimes we get caught up in these things, and we think that that's the important stuff. I wonder, it's just a thought of mine today. If we look at what Jesus said to the people that thought that they were serving God, the supposed, quote, experts of the law, if he said this to them, if he condemned them, called them hypocrites and vipers and snakes, and says, your father is Satan the devil, is it possible? If he felt like that towards the ones that thought that they were really serving him, is it possible that there's people in the church today that think that they're serving God just like the priest did then, that do a lot? They dedicated their lives. Every single day they went out to serve God in their minds for the people. Will he say this to people in the church that are making the same terrible mistakes? Matthew 23:23, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law. What does the weightier matters of the law mean? The most important things. It's not the tithes. making sure you're not cheating from God. That's something you're supposed to do. But doing that is not what gives you the relationship. That's not what's the most important of all. Justice and mercy and faith. These you ought to have done without leaving the others undone. Blind guides who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel? Depart from me, you workers of iniquity. I never knew you. Don't allow yourself to be caught up in that trap. The things that we concentrate the most, I know for myself, the things that I'm concentrating on all the time are not the most important things. Are they important? Yes, but not the most important. We're all as prodigal children. And we shouldn't feel towards our brother or our sister like the son that stuck around and did his duty. And look at his brother, that son of yours. Because he just might tell us, I never knew you. Those that practice lawlessness, iniquity, because it's a huge section of the law. Mercy, justice, and faith. Is there any other